I was 32 years old when I picked out the flowers for my own funeral. Not in a hypothetical way. Not in one of those late-night spirals where you imagine everyone weeping over you and secretly enjoy it. I mean, I sat down with a florist named Gail, in a shop that smelled like cold earth and eucalyptus, and I pointed at a photograph in a binder. White ranunculus. Pale gray dusty miller. Some kind of trailing green the first couldn't pronounce. That one, I said. For the casket spray. Gail wrote it down without asking whose funeral it was. Maybe she assumed I was planning for a parent. Maybe she didn't want to know. Either way, she was kind about it, and I remember thinking that kindness was the only thing keeping me upright in that chair. My name is Mara. I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 6 months before that flower shop visit. I was 31 when I found the lump. 32 when they told me the chemo wasn't working the way we'd hoped. 32 when I started planning the funeral. I'm 33 now, and I'm still alive. Which is, depending on how you look at it, either a miracle or an administrative error. This is the part where I'm supposed to say cancer taught me something beautiful. That it stripped away everything superficial, and showed me what really mattered. That I found God or peace, or some Instagram-ready version of gratitude. I didn't. Cancer didn't make me a better person. It made me smaller, meaner, more afraid, more exhausted, and weirdly specific about what I would and wouldn't tolerate. It also brought my mother back into my life after 25 years of silence, which I did not ask for and did not want. She showed up at my apartment 3 days after I'd finalized the funeral arrangements. I opened the door thinking it was the delivery guy with my hospice and training medication. It wasn't. It was Delia, my mother, standing in the hallway of my building with a single suitcase, a puffer jacket, and the same face I remembered from the last time I saw her, which was at a gas station outside Sacramento when I was 7 years old, watching her argue with my father while I sat in the back seat, clutching a Happy Meal toy that was already broken. She said, "I know you didn't invite me." I said, "Then why are you here?" She said, "Because I read the obituary you wrote." I just stood there. Because I hadn't told her I was sick. I hadn't told her anything. But apparently my obituary, the one I'd written in a fit of morbid efficiency and saved to my laptop, had somehow ended up in a local paper, which I didn't do, which I still don't fully understand. But there it was. And here she was. I didn't slam the door. I wanted to. I imagined it. The satisfaction of the latch clicking. The sound of the hallway going silent. But I was too tired to be dramatic. Chemo fatigue is a special kind of exhaustion. It's not the tired of a long day. It's the tired of gravity being too heavy. Every movement costs something. Even standing in an open doorway while your estranged mother looks at you with those wet, unreadable eyes. I said, "I'm not doing this with you." She said, "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just asking to come inside." And maybe it was the fatigue. Maybe it was the loneliness I never admitted to anyone. Maybe it was something smaller and pettier than that. The fact that my neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Okafor, was definitely listening through her peephole, and I didn't want to give her more material. I stepped back. Fine. 10 minutes. She stayed for 9 months. I need to tell you about my father first, because you can't understand Delia without understanding him. His name was Roger. He was a construction foreman. Big shoulders. Big laugh. Big opinions about everything. Politics, football, the correct way to load a dishwasher, the correct way to grieve. He was the kind of man who thought he was honest when really he was just loud. My mother left when I was 7. That's the simple version. The version I carried for most of my life, the version I told friends and boyfriends and one particularly patient therapist. She left. She drove away. She chose something else over us. The more complicated version, the version I didn't learn until I was 15 and my father was drunk on the anniversary of the day she'd gone, is that she'd been trying to leave for years. Not us. Him. She'd been saving cash in a coffee can in the garage. She'd been talking to a lawyer in Davis. She'd been planning. And he found out. And he gave her a choice. Leave quietly with nothing or stay and watch him take everything. The house, the car, me. Through a custody battle she couldn't afford to win. He told her he'd make it ugly. He told her he'd make me hate her. She left quietly. That's what he told me that night, slurring and crying and punching the kitchen counter. As if any of that could make him the victim of his own cruelty. I did it because I loved you, he kept saying. I did it because I didn't want to lose you. But he did lose me. Maybe not that night. Maybe not the next year. But the truth has a way of shifting the ground under a child's feet. The story I'd told myself, abandoned daughter, selfish mother, cracked down the middle. And what was underneath wasn't clean. It was mud and ash and years of questions I didn't know how to ask. I never told my father I knew. I just started watching him differently. Noticing the way he needed to control every room he entered. Noticing the way he talked about her when she came up. Never angry, always wounded. Which I eventually realized was the most manipulative thing of all. He didn't need to make me hate her. He just needed to make me believe he was heartbroken. I didn't hate him either. That would have been easier. I loved him. I feared him. I pitied him. I resented him. All of it tangled together into something I carried without a name. He died when I was 26. Heart attack. Quick at least. He died in a parking lot outside a hardware store with a bag of deck screws in his hand. I got the call from a stranger whose name I never remembered. The funeral was small. My mother didn't come. And now, 6 years later, here she was at my door, her own face lined and tired, asking for 10 minutes. The first thing she did in my apartment was open the curtains. I can't stand a dark room, she said, as if it were a personality quirk and not a judgment on my entire existence. Okay, I said, too tired to argue. The second thing she did was unload her suitcase into my guest bathroom. I stood in the doorway, watching her line up shampoo bottles on the edge of the tub, like she was moving into a vacation rental. She had the same hands I remembered, small, efficient, always busy. They looked older now. Of course they did. It had been 25 years. You can't stay here, I said. I'm not staying, she said. I'm helping. I don't need help. She turned to look at me. Mara, you have cancer. I know what I have. Do you have anyone else? That stopped me, because the answer was complicated. I had friends, a few scattered, the kind of friends who sent texts saying thinking of you, but never actually showed up. I had a boyfriend once, but he left 6 weeks into chemo, which is a story I don't tell because it makes me sound like a cautionary tale. I had a job, technically, though I'd been on medical leave for months, and the HR emails had started to feel like polite ways of asking when I'd quit. I had my funeral plans. Anyone else? She repeated, softer now. Who can come over? Who can sit with you during the bad days? Who can? I've been doing this alone since July. She nodded slowly. I know. How do you know? How did you even find out I was sick? And how did you see the obituary? She looked away, and for the first time since she'd walked in, she looked uncomfortable. I have a Google alert on your name. I laughed. I actually laughed. It hurt. A Google alert? Is that so strange? It's insane. I wanted to know if you were okay. If you got married. If you moved. She stopped. It's not the same as being there. I know that. But it was what I could do. I didn't know what to say to that. So I said nothing. She finished putting her toiletries away and stood up. I'm not going to pretend I can make up for the last 25 years. I can't. But I can drive you to appointments. I can cook. I can sit with you when you're sick from the chemo. I can be a person in the room so you're not alone. I don't want a person in the room. I want to be left alone. Too bad, she said, not unkindly. You have me. And that was how Delia moved into my one-bedroom apartment with her single suitcase and her Google alerts and her infuriating belief that showing up could fix something that had been broken for a quarter of a century. The first few weeks were quiet. Not peaceful, that's the wrong word. It was more like two feral animals sharing a small territory, each of us trying to move without setting the other off. She slept on my pull-out couch. She cooked meals I mostly couldn't eat. Chemo makes everything taste like metal and regret, and she didn't take it personally when I pushed the plate away. She drove me to appointments and sat in the waiting room with a paperback novel she never seemed to progress in. She organized my medications into little pill organizers with the days of the week printed on them, and I resented how helpful that was. We didn't talk about the past. That was the unspoken agreement. We existed in the present tense, doing the small machinery of illness, And we didn't touch the 25 years between us. I didn't ask why she'd never called. She didn't offer. I didn't tell her about the funeral arrangements. She didn't ask. And then, one night in late September, she found the folder. I should have hidden it. I thought I had. It was in my bedroom drawer, under a stack of old tax documents. But she'd gone looking for a phone charger. Or that's what she said. And when I came out of the bathroom, she was standing in the living room with the folder open in her hands. The floral estimate. The cemetery quote. The draft of the service program. The letter I'd written to be read aloud. The letter that started with, "If you're hearing this, it means things didn't go the way I hoped." She looked up at me. Her face was wet. "Mara," she whispered. I felt something snap. Not dramatically. It wasn't a scream or a slammed door or a glass thrown at the wall. It was quieter than that. It was the feeling of a door I'd kept locked for months, maybe for years, finally opening, and behind it was not anger but exhaustion. Bone-deep, soul-level exhaustion. I had to, I said. Nobody else was going to do it. I don't have a partner. I don't have siblings. Dad's gone. I have a couple of friends who'd be too awkward to plan anything. So I did it myself. Is that what you wanted to find? Proof that I'm handling this alone? Because I am. And I've been doing fine. She shook her head. This isn't fine. This is a flower arrangement for your casket. At least I'll have good flowers. That's not funny. It's a little funny. She set the folder down on the coffee table. Her hands were shaking. Who wrote the obituary? I blinked. What? The obituary. The one I saw online. Who wrote it? I wrote it. Months ago. I don't know how it got published. I think maybe my friend Emily submitted it to the wrong place. She was supposed to be helping me organize some things and I stopped. Why does it matter? She sat down heavily on the couch. The folder was still open, my own words staring up at me from the program draft. Because when I read it, I thought you were already dead. The room went very still. I thought I'd missed it, she continued. I thought you died and no one had told me. And I sat at my kitchen table for 3 hours, reading that obituary over and over. It said survived by her mother Delia. It said that. And I thought I was too late. I lowered myself into the armchair across from her. My body felt like it was made of glass. I'm not dead, I said. I know that now. Was that the only reason you came? Because you thought I was dead? She hesitated. No. I came because I thought you might be dying. Same thing. No. It's not. Dead is past tense. Dying is. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Dying is now. And I wanted to be here for the now, if you'd let me. I didn't say anything for a long time. Outside, a siren passed. A neighbor's TV murmured through the wall. The world continued, indifferent and ordinary. How did you find out it wasn't true? I finally asked. About me being dead? I called your building. Talked to a woman named Mrs. Okafor. She said you were alive but very sick. She said I should come. She said you'd been alone too long. I made a mental note to be furious at Mrs. Okafor later. But beneath the anger, beneath the exhaustion, there was something else. Something I didn't want to name. Relief maybe. Or a terrible, embarrassing kind of gratitude. I'm not going to pretend I'm glad you're here, I said. I know. And I'm not going to forgive you just because you drove 6 hours with a suitcase. I know that too. But you can stay. For now. She nodded. Okay. That was the first door. Just a crack. But it was open. The thing about cancer is that it's boring. That sounds wrong, but it's true. The movies show you the big moments. The diagnosis, the sobbing, the montage of chemo sessions, the triumphant walk out of the hospital. They don't show you the hours in between. The waiting rooms with their worn-out magazines and their smell of disinfectant and old coffee. The afternoons on the couch, too sick to sleep but too tired to do anything but stare at the ceiling. The phone calls with insurance companies. The forms. The endless, bureaucratic, soul-deadening forms. My mother became fluent in that boredom. She learned the name of every receptionist at the oncology clinic. She knew which parking floor had the shortest walk to the elevator. She kept a notebook with my medication schedule, my doctor's names, My pain levels on a scale of 1 to 10, my food aversions, my sleep patterns. It was obsessive and maternal, and somehow the most loving thing anyone had ever done for me. I didn't know how to feel about that. I'd spent 25 years building a version of her in my head. A selfish woman who'd abandoned her daughter to save herself. And now here was this other version, waking up at 5 a.m. to prep bone broth I couldn't drink, sleeping on a pull-out couch that creaked every time she turned over, sitting through my appointments with her hands folded in her lap like she was praying. One afternoon, after a particularly brutal chemo session, I was lying on the couch, and she was making tea in the kitchen. I could hear her moving around, the soft clink of the mug, the kettle starting to hiss. "Did you ever try to contact me?" I asked. The words came out before I could stop them. The kitchen sounds paused. "What do you mean?" "I mean after you left. Did you ever call? Right? Anything?" She didn't answer right away. The kettle clicked off. I heard her pour the water, the sound of the ceramic warming. "I wrote you letters," she finally said. "Every month for the first 2 years." I sat up too fast. The room tilted. "What letters?" "Your father never gave them to you. Or he did, but..." She came into the living room, holding 2 mugs. "I don't know. He told me to stop. He said you didn't want to hear from me. He said I was confusing you." "You believed him? He was your father. He was with you every day. I was the one who left." She set 1 mug on the coffee table in front of me. "It was easy to believe I'd done too much damage to deserve a relationship with you. That's not an answer." She sat down on the edge of the armchair. "No, it's not. The truth is I stopped fighting. I got tired. I was working 2 jobs, living in a studio apartment in Bakersfield, and every time I sent a letter I got silence back. I told myself it was him, and maybe it was, but maybe part of me needed to believe it was over, because hoping was too painful." I stared at the mug. "Gingertea." I hated ginger tea. I told her that twice. She kept making it anyway. Maybe because she'd read somewhere that it helped with nausea, maybe because she didn't know how else to show she cared. "So you chose the easier thing," I said. "Yes. And now you're here." "Yes. Why now? Because I'm sick?" She looked at me. "Because I'm 70 years old, Mara. And I've spent the last 25 years telling myself that one day I'd be brave enough to find you. And then I read your obituary, and I realized I'd run out of one day." I didn't say anything. The tea went cold. In October, my oncologist said the words I'd been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. "The tumor is responding. It's not gone, but it's shrinking. We'll continue the treatment, and we'll reassess in January." Shrinking. I should have felt something. Hope. Relief. Cautious optimism. Instead, I felt nothing. Just the dull, familiar fog of my own body failing to celebrate. I told Delia in the parking lot. She started crying immediately, not loud, just tears sliding down her face while she fumbled with the car keys. "That's good news," she said. That's really good news." "I know. Then why do you look like that?" I looked out the window at the parking garage, the gray concrete, the distant rows of cars. I think I forgot how to feel good things. She was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and put her hand on my arm. It was the first time she'd touched me since I was 7 years old. The weight of her palm was lighter than I expected. Warmer. "Can I take you somewhere?" she asked. "Where?" "Anywhere. Somewhere that isn't this parking garage or your apartment or a hospital." I thought about it. My body ached. My head was foggy. The idea of going anywhere felt like climbing a mountain. But something about her hand on my arm made me nod. "Okay," I said. "Surprise-me." She drove us to a diner. Not a nice diner, a frayed neon-edged diner on the edge of town with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that didn't work. She ordered us both milkshakes. I told her I couldn't taste anything. She said that wasn't the point. We sat across from each other in the booth, and she told me about the day she left. "I'd been packing for a week," she said. "Little things so your father wouldn't notice. A few shirts. My mother's ring. The only good pair of shoes I owned. I didn't have a plan beyond getting to Sacramento. I had a friend there who said I could stay on her couch. Why didn't you take me with you?" She flinched. But she didn't look away. Because I thought I'd come back for you. I thought I'd get established, get a lawyer, fight for custody. That was the plan. But every step was harder than I imagined. And the longer I was gone, the more I convinced myself you were better off without me. Better off with him? Better off with stability. A house. A school you didn't have to change. A father who, whatever his flaws, was there every morning. I shook my head. He wasn't a monster. I know that. But he was, I stopped. He was so angry. All the time. At you. At me. At everything. I used to think if I could just be good enough, he'd stop. But he never did. Delia's jaw tightened. I knew he was angry. I didn't know he aimed it at you. Kids don't write letters about that stuff. No. I guess they don't. The milkshakes arrived. Vanilla for her, strawberry for me. I took a sip. It tasted like cold nothing, but she was right. That wasn't the point. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. The obituary. You said you read it and thought I was dead. But you still came. Why? If you thought you were too late, why drive 6 hours? She set her glass down carefully. Because I wanted to see where you'd been. Who you'd become. What kind of life you'd built. Even if I couldn't be in it. She paused. And because I needed to say goodbye. I never got to. Not once. Not when you were 7. Not ever. I thought maybe if I came, I could find your grave and finally tell you everything I should have said when you were alive. And then you found out I was alive. And then I found out you were alive. She smiled then, tiny and wobbly. And I realized I didn't want to say goodbye. I wanted to say hello. I sat there, holding my tasteless strawberry milkshake, and I felt something crack in my chest. Not the bad kind. The other kind. The kind that happens when a lock you've been picking for years finally turns. I called Emily that night. Emily was my best friend from college. We'd been inseparable once, but the cancer had made me reclusive, and she'd eventually stopped calling as often. It wasn't her fault. I'd made it impossible. Still, I'd trusted her with the funeral planning. I'd given her the obituary file. I'd asked her to hold on to things just in case. Hey, she said when she answered. I was going to call you. Emily, did you submit my obituary to a newspaper? Silence. Emily. I didn't submit it to a newspaper, she said slowly. I posted it to a memorial site. As part of the planning. I thought you wanted it ready to go. It was supposed to be private. Which site? She told me. I made her send me the link. When I opened it, I saw what she'd done. She'd created a memorial page. Not published publicly, not shared anywhere, but indexed by search engines. My name. My photo. The dates left blank. The obituary I'd written, uploaded as a draft. And below it, a comments section. There was one comment. Posted 11 weeks ago. It said, Mara, if this is real, if you're really gone, I need you to know I loved you. I never stopped. I was too weak to fight for you, and I've been sorry every single day. I'll carry that to my grave. D. I read it 3 times. Then I called my mother into the room. You didn't find a Google alert, I said. She stood in the doorway, her face pale. You found the memorial page. You found the draft Emily posted. That's how you knew. I do have a Google alert. But that's not how you found it. She exhaled. No. I was searching for you. Like I did sometimes. I'd search your name just to see if anything came up. New photos. New posts. And that night, the memorial page came up first. And you thought. I thought you died and someone had created the page. The dates weren't filled in. I didn't know if it was a mistake or if it was real. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Then I got in the car. I looked down at my phone. The comment. Her words. I loved you. I never stopped. Written when she thought I was dead, not to manipulate me, not to win points, but just there. A message into the void. You could have told me, I said. I was ashamed. Of how I found it. Of the fact that I'd been searching for you for years without reaching out. She sat down on the couch staring at her hands. I didn't know how to explain why it took your possible death to make me brave. I sat down next to her. The pull-out couch creaked. The apartment was quiet. I read the comment, I said. I know. You said you loved me. I did. I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, I believe you. And for the first time since she'd walked through my door, Delia broke down completely. Not the polite tears from the parking lot. Not the silent crying in the living room. This was a deep, ugly, racking sob that came from somewhere buried. I watched her cry and I didn't try to fix it. I just sat there letting it happen. That was October. And for the first time since I'd planned my own funeral, I wasn't sure I wanted to die anymore. Not because of the cancer treatment. Not because of the shrinking tumor. But because my mother was crying on my pull-out couch, and I wanted to be alive long enough to understand her. The complication arrived in November. Not a medical complication, a personal one. A knock on the door at 9 p.m. I opened it to find a man I didn't recognize, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that flickered with something familiar. Can I help you? I asked. Are you Mara? Who's asking? My name's Isaac. I'm your cousin. Your mother's sister's son. I stared at him. I didn't know I had an aunt. I didn't know I had a cousin. Delia came up behind me. I heard her breath catch. Ike, she said quietly. What are you doing here? He looked at her with an expression I couldn't read. Your sister's in the hospital. She's been asking for you. Delia went still. What happened? Stroke. 3 days ago. She's stable, but... He glanced at me. She keeps saying your name. I turned to look at my mother. Her face had drained of color. You have a sister? She didn't answer. She was staring at Isaac like he'd just handed her a subpoena. I need to go, she said. Go where? Chico. That's where my sister lives. Lives or... She looked at Isaac. Which hospital? He told her. She turned to me, and for a moment, she looked like a stranger. I have to go. I'm sorry. I have to. Then go, I said. You can't be alone. Not right now. I've been alone for months. I'll be fine. She didn't believe me. I could see it on her face. But she also didn't have a choice. The sister I'd never known existed was lying in a hospital bed hours away, calling her name. I'll be back as soon as I can, she said. Okay. She grabbed her coat. She grabbed her bag. And then at the door she turned around and looked at me with something raw in her eyes. I'll explain everything when I get back. I promise. I didn't say anything. I just watched her leave. She was gone for 6 days. I spent the first day numb, the second day angry, the third day terrified, and the remaining 3 days cycling through all of the above. I didn't know what she was doing. She texted twice, both times brief. Surgery went well. We'll call soon. Neither message explained anything. While she was gone, I called Emily. I asked her about the obituary, about the memorial page, about all of it. She cried. She apologized. She'd been trying to help and had made things worse. I told her it was okay, that I wasn't angry anymore. I think I meant it. I also spent a lot of time thinking about my mother. The version I'd carried for 25 years, the version I was starting to know, and the version that had a sister. A sister named. I didn't even know her name. A sister she'd never mentioned. A sister whose son had somehow tracked down Delia's location. When she finally came back, it was almost midnight on a Friday. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her hair was unwashed. Her coat was wrinkled. She's stable, she said before I could ask. It was a hemorrhagic stroke. She's still in the ICU, but the doctors are cautiously optimistic. I was sitting in the armchair wrapped in a blanket. What's her name? Delia paused in the middle of taking off her coat. Rose. Your sister's name is Rose. Yes. Why didn't you tell me about her? She sat down heavily on the edge of the couch. The pull-out frame made its familiar metallic sigh. Because Rose was part of the reason I left. I waited. She told me. Rose was younger than Delia by 6 years. She'd been born with a congenital heart condition. Something that required surgeries as a child and constant monitoring as an adult. Their parents, my grandparents, who I'd never met, had died when Delia was 22. Rose was 16. Delia raised her, put her through school, sacrificed everything. And then Rose got married to a man named Victor, who had money and opinions and a way of making Delia feel like an intruder in her own family. Rose pulled away. Delia let her. That was the pattern. Delia letting people go to keep the peace. When I left your father, she said. Rose was living in Chico with Victor. She had a son, Isaac. I'd met him once, maybe twice. We weren't close. I didn't know how to fix it, so I didn't try. What does that have to do with why you left? She looked at me. I left because I was drowning. And the only person who'd ever helped me stay afloat was Rose. But Rose had her own life, her own family, and I couldn't bear to be another burden. Another burden? Your father made me feel like one. My parents' death made me feel like one. Raising Rose made me feel like one, even though I loved her. I didn't know how to be needed without resenting it. And I didn't know how to ask for help without feeling weak. She stopped, and I could see her struggling with the next words. Leaving you felt like the only thing I could do that was truly mine. Not a sacrifice. Not an obligation. Just escape. And I've hated myself for it every day since. I didn't know what to say. So I said the only honest thing in my head. Rose is your sister, and she's in the hospital. Are you going back? Tomorrow, she said. If you'll come with me. Me. I want you to meet her. I want you to meet Isaac. I don't want to keep living with this wall between us and everyone else. If you're strong enough to travel, I want you to come. I thought about the funeral arrangements, the flower choice, the obituary draft, the months of preparing for an ending. I don't know if I can, I said. I know, but I'm asking. The room was quiet. The clock ticked. Outside, the city moved on. Okay, I said. We drove to Chico the next morning. 6 hours in the car. My mother behind the wheel, me in the passenger seat with a pillow tucked against my ribs. She played old songs on the radio and didn't try to fill the silence. Every so often, I'd catch her glancing at me, like she was making sure I was still there. The hospital was smaller than the one where I'd been treated, but it smelled the same, antiseptic and floor wax and the ghosts of bad coffee. We walked through the corridors and I felt my body resisting. Too many memories. Too many fluorescent lights. Rose was in a private room on the 3rd floor. When we walked in, she was propped up in bed, her face lopsided in the way stroke victims' faces sometimes are. But her eyes were bright and clear. Dee, she said, and her voice was a whisper. You came. I came, Delia said, and she crossed the room to take her sister's hand. I hung back, unsure of my place. Isaac was there too, standing near the window. He nodded at me. I nodded back. Mara, Rose said, turning her head slowly toward me. You look like your mother did at your age. I didn't know what to say to that. I've been told. Rose tried to smile. I'm sorry I never knew you. That was my fault. I let Victor. She stopped, struggling for the words. I let too many things get in the way. It's okay. It's not. She closed her eyes for a moment. But maybe now, maybe we can try. I looked at my mother. She was still holding Rose's hand, her face wet. And I understood in that moment that this was the thing she'd been running from and running toward her whole life. The family she built and broken and built again. I pulled a chair up to the bed and sat down. I'd like that, I said. Rose recovered. Slowly, imperfectly, but she recovered. Delia drove us back to my apartment, and then she drove back to Chico every other weekend. Sometimes I went with her. Sometimes I didn't. And through all of it, through the hospital visits and the strained dinners and the slow, halting process of learning the shape of a family, my body kept fighting. The chemo continued. The tumor kept shrinking. In January, my oncologist used the word remission, carefully, with caveats and follow-up scans and the understanding that nothing was guaranteed. I sat in the car afterward, in the passenger seat of my mother's car, and I cried. Not the pretty kind. Not the kind you'd want photographed. The ugly kind. The kind that comes from some deep well inside you that you'd forgotten was there. Delia held my hand and didn't say anything. And I realized in that moment that she was the only person who'd ever loved me without needing me to be okay. A year later, I closed the funeral folder. It was still in my apartment in a drawer gathering dust. I took it out one Sunday morning and looked through it. The flower choices. The program draft. The obituary. Marie, born in Sacramento in 1991, died in. The dates were blank. I called Emily. I told her to delete the memorial page. She did. I called the florist Gail. I told her I wouldn't be needing the arrangements. She said, "That's wonderful news." I could hear in her voice that she meant it. And then I called my mother. "Can you come over?" I said. "Is everything okay? I want to show you something." She arrived 20 minutes later. I handed her the folder. "I don't need this anymore," I said. She opened it. She looked through the pages. When she got to the letter, the one that started with, "If you're hearing this, it means things didn't go the way I hoped," she stopped. "Do you want me to throw it away?" she asked. "I want you to keep it. As a reminder." "Of what?" I thought about it. The answer came slowly. Of what I was willing to do to protect myself. And what I almost missed because of it. She closed the folder and held it against her chest. "I love you, Mara." "I know." She raised an eyebrow. "That's all." I smiled. "I love you too." It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It wasn't a movie ending. The wound was still there. A scar that would always be a scar. But scars are not open wounds. They're the evidence of healing. My mother stayed in the city after that. She got a small apartment of her own about 15 minutes from mine. We had dinner on Sundays. We fought sometimes. We laughed sometimes. We were building something slowly out of the ruins of what had been. And I no longer planned my own funeral. Instead, I started planning other things. Small at first. A trip to the coast. A birthday dinner. A garden on the balcony of my apartment. I filled the ground of my life with things that were alive, flowers, yes, but also people. My mother. My aunt. My cousin. Emily, who I let back in. The obituary is still in her apartment somewhere. I don't ask about it. I know it's there, a relic of the person I used to be. Someone who faced death with a spreadsheet and a floral estimate, and who had to learn slowly and painfully how to let herself be loved. The cancer could come back. I know that. It's always in the back of my mind. A shadow that never fully disappears. But I'm 33 now. And I'm still alive. And for the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving. I'm living.